Mr. President, while the World Economic Forum convenes another big event happening in the other parts of the world, the inauguration of the U.S. President Donald Trump, what do you think this also as a topic A for the World Economic Forum? As the President and CEO, what is your take?
So it is clear that a lot of people in Davos also follow very carefully what is happening in the U.S. And we see that the sessions we have on the future of North America and the U.S. and sessions deciphering the Trump presidency is already totally oversubscribed.
If there are questions coming from you, what would you ask?
So I would ask him what is the steps he's going to take the next 100 days. How is he going to deal with the Middle East? Also the relationship between the G2, being China and the US, is of course of great interest. We took also note that there was a phone call between President-elect Trump and President Xi Jinping of China on Saturday. I think that was a good start. I think it was important that the two leaders already started a dialogue on peace and development, or peace and stability, as Mr. Trump put it. And I also have seen that, according to the American media, that Trump has said that he wants to visit China. So maybe there will be more dialogue than competition, who knows?
Having said that, though, we understand there's a lot of concerns about protectionism and also trade tariffs, as well as competition for technological supremacy and what it means for the rest of the world. Now, as President and CEO, once again, the World Economic Forum, you call for improve the state of the world with collaboration all over the world. Now, how do you see these trends, and what do you think the new administration in the U.S. can do in order to support the cause that you believe in?
I think we have to be realpolitical in the sense that in the world order that we had post the Cold War for the last almost more than 30 years, it was more of a win-win thinking. What is good for you is good for us. We are now moving into a new world order that is more multipolar, but also is more about each country's self-interest.
Is it still in transition, or is it already set in your view?
It's not set. I think we're between orders. We had one order. We don't exactly know what the new world order will be, but it will be more multipolar, but it's still bipolar, unipolar in some areas. You know, China and the US is still almost 50% of the global economy together. The US probably has more than 45% of the overall military power and capacity in the world. But we're moving more into a multipolar world because there's a lot of emerging economies. You have the global south too. But we will also need in that new world order to collaborate because there are areas of so much common interest. Look at future pandemics. We know that don't stop at border crossings. We also know that, for example, climate change. Look at the wildfires now being in Los Angeles. We will see more of that kind of weather events and also things caused, droughts and wildfires caused by climate change in the future. And here we need to collaborate.
In the rhetorics, collaboration are not necessarily the key words. How would you be able to provide these keywords onto the notebook of the politicians, especially those politicians who are coming into power since last year? As you know, almost half the world's population are going through elections in their own countries.
Competition versus collaboration. There are areas where countries will compete fiercely. I think on the new technologies, you will see strong competition between China and the US as the two leading powers on the technology side, on artificial intelligence, on the Internet of Things, also when it comes to digital trade. But even in a situation with strong competition that I think will be there, because both of these countries know that the country on top of the new technologies will probably be the most prosperous country also. Even in such a situation, I think what we saw with the call between President Trump and President Xi Jinping is that they realize both that there are common interests. Look at artificial intelligence. I think that it would be a good idea that the humans are on top of the algorithms, right, and not the algorithms on top of the humans. And I think it was excellent when President Biden and President Xi Jinping signed this agreement in Peru, where they said that artificial intelligence has nothing to do with being there when it comes to nuclear weapons. Yeah. The use of nuclear weapons is a pure human decision. Right. And of course, some people would say that should be very obvious, but that shows that there are at least a willingness to also discuss areas where we maybe, hopefully, can see some traffic rules when it comes to AI, because today there are no traffic rules.
In the latest interview with the Time magazine, Mr. President, you talk about the geopolitical deficit, if I remember the word. What do you exactly mean? How can we make sure there can be a surplus rather than a deficit?
So it's true that the geopolitical backdrop that this Davos is happening against, yeah, is the most complicated one in generations. Mm-hmm. And we are also, in many ways, faced with a geopolitical recession. And this recession should end, and what we have to hope for is that geopolitical competition, the wars and the conflicts don't impact the global economy. So far, the global economy has been quite resilient. We expect more than 3% economic growth overall this year. In emerging economies, we expect maybe 4.5%. That's not great compared to the past. Trend growth the last 20 years have been higher, but it is growth. And what we have to make sure is that we don't see the geopolitics, for example, an escalation between Israel and Iran ending up in a full-fledged war. That would lead also to severe impact on the economic development. And we need growth. We need more jobs. We need more prosperity. And then we also have to continue to trade with each other. That is very important.
Talking about the economy, China's economy has been adjusting its structure. Meanwhile, China has been embracing the new quality productive forces, yet it takes time. How do you see the pace of China's economic development?
So medium, long term, I'm quite optimistic on China's development and economy. It is true that short term, China also has to adjust, and I think China is doing that. There is a stimulus now from the central government. I think there is a focus also on then increasing the demand among consumers in China, while China is dealing with the debt related to property, also the demography, where you are seeing a sinking workforce for the first time, and then this creates partly like a deflationary pressure. But I think China is now also adjusting to the fact that the global demand for goods and manufacturing is not as strong as the demand for services and also for digital trade. So China is pivoting. And in a situation where you have to go through those structural changes and that pivoting, of course, there are some challenges, but I'm confident that China will get the policies right here. And if you look at the demography, of course, you can also increase the working population by other politically.
From the World Economic Forum's perspective, what is the key to the Chinese economy with very rich experience you have had over the years?
I think China has already taken some steps, that the U.S. market is still important for export for China, but it used to be 20% of China's export going to the U.S. Today, it's down to 12%. So 88% of what China produces is sold to other markets. I do think that the Chinese leadership is also looking at being less relying on export, but also opening up for more consumption domestically. But that is not done overnight because people also in China do save.
Yeah.
So if they
save a lot.
Yeah. So if people get more money, they don't spend them, they save them. And this is also related to the situation in the property market. So one has to walk through that. What works in the interest of China is also that research and development and among the amount of people that are well educated, and increasingly so, is the basis for also dealing with a new intelligent economy. So every year, as you know, there's 12 million students leaving universities in China. 2.8 of them are very good engineers. Currently, they're struggling a bit to find jobs, but I think when China is pivoting more from then manufacturing into digital economy, digital trade and services, then this will also solve itself. But it's a period where one has to be a bit impatient, but also structural reforms is now the basis also for future success. And of course, China has then a clear plan for this. So we do expect 5% economic growth for China this year. That's not bad compared to what we're seeing, for example, in Europe, where we're seeing 1% economic growth.
8 years ago, when Chinese President Xi Jinping was delivering a keynote speech at the World Economic Forum annual meeting, at which won tremendous response from the international community. A lot of things have changed, but upon the 8 years, which is usually a big year for Chinese, what do you think about the nature of the messages carried in that speech? And what does that mean for the forum and China?
So we really appreciated a lot then President Xi Jinping's speech in 2017 here in Davos, where he underlined that we are all in the same boat, and even in a more multipolar world, we have to keep multilateralism. And it's important when there are more key players, there should abide to some key rules, and also that the UN Charter should be upheld. And I think that was a strong message. We appreciate so much the collaboration we have with China. We also know after Winter Davos, we're preparing for Summer Davos in Tianjin. Yeah. And we know there is also a lot of interest among the senior global business community about China, and also to understand better the development.
What about the cooperation possibility between China and Europe, since the World Economic Forum is headquartered here in Europe? Many ask how much space really is there, potential is there. We see so much rhetoric going on these days, but I'm sure there are a lot of interactions behind the scenes. What is your judgment?
Europe also has to look at its own self-interest, as the U.S. does, and also like China does, and look at what President von der Leyen, the steps she took before Christmas. She went to Latin America and signed a trade agreement with Mercosur, and together the EU, that has the largest market in the world, let's not forget that the single market is the largest market in the world, made a deal with key Latin American countries, and together EU and these Latin American countries almost is 30% of the global economy. There's also a discussion between the EU and India to do a mega trade agreement. So I think the EU is looking more at its kind of European strategic interdependence, carving out a role for itself between the G2, China and the U.S.
What do you think, Mr. President, after interviewing, talking every year, inviting hundreds of leadership all over the world, the quality of leadership, particularly political leadership these days, sir?
I think we still have very strong leaders in many parts of the world, but we will need to also make sure that there are agreements made in the future in the interest of humankind. I hope that we can still continue to trade with each other, that we can continue to invest with each other, and also that we can collaborate on important topics like climate change, trade, investments, AI, even, for example, cybercrime. You know, there are $2 trillion is lost in cybercrime every year. And I think the US and China has common interest in getting rid of that, because that's only then not the countries benefiting from it. These criminals are really making things very hard. So I hope for 2025 to be a year where we hopefully will be surprised, positively surprised by some collaboration.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. As you know, this is the time of the Lunar Chinese New Year. We would love to have you maybe to send your greetings to your friends and your colleagues and the Chinese people in China.
So I know how much the Lunar New Year, the Spring Festival means to the Chinese people, and I would like to send my warmest wishes here from Davos and the World Economic Forum to the Chinese people. You have to enjoy this joyful period, and I hope for a very prosperous year to come for China.